India is building up infrastructure in Ladakh to counter a two-front threat from China and Pakistan. However, now China has built a road through the lower Shaksgam Valley. The roadhead now is less than 30 miles from the Siachen Glacier. And this has triggered speculation about China's intentions and capabilities, a potential collusive threat posed by China and Pakistan to India's defenses in the Siachen Glacier region. What are China's intentions? Does it have the capability to build a road that traverses extremely high altitudes and glaciated terrain? Joining me to discuss this are Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury, Lt Gen Rajeev Chaudhry, former DG BRO, my colleagues Aditya, Kaul and Nivriti Mohan here in the News9 Plus studio. Welcome to the News9 Plus Show, gentlemen. I want to start by asking General Rajeev, this satellite imagery that we have seen about China expanding its presence in Shaksgam Valley, they're building a road through there. You're a military infrastructure man, General Rajeev. Tell us the impact this road will have on our strategic posture in the northern frontiers.
Now that is very certain that if that road comes up in Shaksgam Valley, it will have a very far-reaching strategic impact. But then on the other side, you see, we are also prepared equally well what China is doing. So we have also been accelerating the pace of work in the sector north, especially, and also Tumar sector. So there's nothing much to worry about this road, what has been noticed very recent past. We have achieved the connectivity to Caption very recently, and we have constructed a bridge on Shok River at Sase France. Nothing much to worry.
Nothing to worry about. Aditya, I am fully aware of the fact that both you and Nivriti are a handful of journalists who have actually been to all these places that we are talking about. You were there just last month. Tell us the impact on the ground that this infrastructure build-up has had. You've been there in 2020 as well, when the build-up began with the Chinese coming into Galwan. What's the difference 4 years after?
Well, there's tremendous difference. First, we took note. We knew the developments that were happening across the border. But this time around, I think there's a far-reaching realization in New Delhi that there needs to be counter steps.
Yes.
Earlier, I remember the first time that I explored this region in detail was around 2013, 2012, when Xi Jinping had just arrived.
Yes.
And we knew about the kind of challenges and consequences that one might have. I am told personally, much of it hasn't really come out, that at that time as well, the Indian Army, the BRO and other wings of the government there had a plan. But at that time, the government did not have the political willingness to move ahead either with the construction of the infrastructure or, in fact, respond to the incursions and the developments that were coming in from the Chinese PLA. But this time around, over the last decade, perhaps it started to a certain level in the UPA, but far-reaching consequences were realized only after Galwan, around 2020. And there has been a constructive development, and that is that when I visited Eastern Ladakh and I traveled all across this region, there's a region I actually went to Siachen, and from Siachen, from Tangse, I went to Chushul, and I could see the difference. In 2013, there were no roads at all. There was a kacha rasta completely. Today, not only have massive roads been built up in the region, but we have 5G connectivity. I was standing bang at the LAC at one of the forward locations of the Indian Army, and I could see 5G connectivity. Now, I do not say that the construction of the Shaksgam road, which is in the 48-kilometer periphery of Siachen, will not have consequences. This is strategic, maneuvering that the Chinese PLA is doing. We realize that, and there are, things that are in place that the Indian Army is certainly doing. The biggest of all is the in-road, connectivity that is being put in place, and of course, over the last 4 to 5 years, we have had many more soldiers deployed, much more resources, many more, ammunition, etc. that is in place as well. But I think there needs to be consistency in this. That is what will really help in this entire.
Absolutely. And Nivriti, you got us visuals of the Nyoma Airfield, stunning visuals from the roof of the world, literally the world's highest airbase. You've also covered the BRO's road expansion. Tell us what we're looking at over here, Nivriti, these exclusive visuals that you've got us.
Yes, these are the latest visuals from the Nyoma Airfield, which is now being called Mud Airfield.
Yes.
It is highest airfield in the world, and this stretch that you are watching right now,
Yes.
it is 2.7 kilometers of the runway
Right.
that will be used for the aircrafts to land, and any kind of aircraft
Yes.
can land on this airfield.
2.7 kilometers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So logistical and operational
It's a
support for the
massive,
forward-
flat ground, and I see an airfield right there, and there's a Chinook or a Mi-17 helicopter parked there in the middle of it. But that brings me to Air Marshal Chaudhry, Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury. We're looking at these spectacular visuals. Tell us what we are seeing. Nyoma, why is this such a big deal for the Indian Air Force and indeed for an entire posture in along the northern frontiers?
I know the significance of that airfield, and way back in that region, I think right from 1957 when we first, when the Xinjiang Tibet road was opened, and that's when we realized that it passes through Indian territory, and we at that time the government decided to move it to the forward policy, and that's when we realized that it was an extremely hard call, this forward policy, because it needed entirely to be maintained by air. We didn't have any roads way back then.
Right.
And in fact, right down to 1960, just prior to the 1962 war, we had airfields, ALGs operating from Leh,
Yes.
Chushul, Phukche, and DBO. And they played a vital role in air maintaining these areas. And
Right.
you remember the roads were still not reaching into Ladakh. So over the years, I think at some point, with the geopolitical and threat concerns waxing and waning in the region, I think we gave a little sort of leeway to China, where
Right.
we actually ignored that area the way we should have looked at it. We did. And as a result, our infrastructure build-up was slow coming. But nevertheless, I think we got onto the bandwagon pretty quickly. And Nyoma becomes critical because it's going to become a fighter-capable airfield. It's right now catering for heavy platforms, essentially from the transport categories, for essentially airlift, air logistics, and mobility, which is a very important factor. And in this region, I think there are those 6 airstrips which have always had historical significance, and I call them the 6 sisters. That is DBO, right on top, Dollar Bay Goldie. Next, below that is Toys, the Leh Airfield,
Yes.
Chushul Airfield, Nyoma, and right down to Phukche. The Air Force had importantly that we need to develop this airfield, and not just from maintenance and logistics perspective,
Yes.
but simply because of the fact that we need fighter-capable airfields in this region, which gives us a reach into the Tibetan region.
Right.
And that is where this airfield became critical. And extension of this airfield, making it into a full-scale airfield, probably and definitely in the future will be capable of hosting a whole lot of fighter.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Air Marshal Chaudhry. This point that you made is very interesting. The 6 sisters, the 6 airfields that are so critical to the northern defenses. General Chaudhry, you've been involved in building airfields like this. You've kind of, alleviated a lot of our anxiety when it comes to the infrastructure build. And in fact, I think that is one of the greatest achievements of this government in the last decade. The kind of infrastructure that we've been seeing, the build-up, as Aditya mentioned, that there were, areas that were deserts a decade ago, and today you have, roads over there, which is allowing, troops to be moved forward, airfields to be built, the 6 sisters. Nivriti's covered that as well. Tell us, when, by which year would we reach a kind of tipping point with China where we can kind of say that, look, we are very comfortable now on the LAC in terms of moving simultaneously along multiple axes of the LAC?
That is a very good question. Firstly, I must tell you, Mr. Sandeep, that 2 co-panelists today, Diptendu Choudhury and Rajeev Chaudhry, both are NDA course mates, and we have had a wonderful association since the last 44 years.
Yes.
So that is one, and I have been seeing the work of Aditya Raj and Nivriti. Nivriti went up to Umlingla and covered that story very well from Hanle, what all is happening around Hanle. That
Yes.
is the crux of all the development which is happening, infrastructure development in Ladakh, Eastern Ladakh especially. So I will start from top, like we connected in last 4 years. I will
Right.
talk firstly, the inflection point has been the present government taking over.
Yes.
As you told in a oblique manner, even Diptendu also mentioned, that earlier governments were thinking always more defensive, and there was a regressive narrative which was created all the time that
Right.
whatever we create on the borders will be utilized by the Chinese to
Absolutely.
it will
Used
be
by the
to
Chinese to
advantage.
enter Indian territory. The defense minister of the last government said so in parliament.
Absolutely. This was, of course, mentioned also. Uh, China started their infrastructure development sometime in 1960s,
Right.
and we also created border roads at the same time. But then the funding was not there, and we didn't really handle this operation very well. However, 2015 or so, there are a lot of reforms made, and the government took the infrastructure of the borders very seriously
Right.
from the strategic point of view and socio-economic development. Because the earlier governments treated these villages and towns on the borders as buffer zones. They never
Right.
developed this, never let this come up. And the road head differential was considerable. I will not mention the figures here for obvious reasons, but it was considerable. So last 10 years, the lot of emphasis and focus has been there on this infrastructure development, and we have shrunk this border road differential quite a bit. And my conservative guess is if the incremental funding is there,
Right.
as last 4 years for the GS road, government has given 160% jump to the budget,
Right.
and that is very encouraging. The border road infrastructure or any infrastructure development is the outcome of the funding.
Yes.
So that is one. So I give a guess that within 5 years, if all things happen as we have seen in last 4 years, we
Right.
can shrink this. We can be at the parity with China. That is number one. Secondly, I will specifically cover certain infrastructure development which has taken place. Now, DBO has been connected, as Aditya told in 2013, and later on also he had gone there in
Yes.
2020. But now DBO is connected very well from Leh, and now alternate connectivity to DBO has also been struck on this 25th March of 24 from Sasoma, Sasekla to Gapshan.
Right.
So that is a very major achievement what Border Road has done. And a bridge has been made at Saser Brangza, which is at 15,000 feet. One can't imagine existing on those altitudes. And we worked exactly in 174 days. This 345-meter permanent bridge has been created. So
Right.
that is
Right.
wonderful. And we have made a road till now Bobring to Hot Spring. So
Yes.
that is great achievement. Our troops can be there all along the border if any situation arises.
Right.
The road is on a full swing from Chushul, Dumpi, Phukche, Demchok, what Nivriti also covered.
Right.
This road will be completed by October this year for sure.
Right.
And we have done our calculations. Nyoma is a very, very important project for PRO.
Yes.
It languished very badly. Means this was conceived by Air Force sometime in October 2008.
Right.
And in 2009, the ALG was constructed by a engineer regiment. That is from combat engineers made a ALG. But then that was not good enough.
Right.
That was not good enough. And we have been through the bureaucratic processes and all. Finally, in 2020, government agreed to the proposal, and 2022, the sanction was done. And the work started in 2023, August.
Right.
And my conservative estimate is PDC is 2025 July, but maybe this working season itself, the Nyoma Airfield will be completed. So
This-
that is the
Yes.
kind of work which is being done.
Thank you, General Chaudhry. A very important date that you've given us is 2029. That 5 years from now, Aditya, General Chaudhry mentioned that we would be in a good position when it comes to China facing off, in terms of infrastructure at least.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
He had earlier also said that we may exceed what China has done, we may outdo
We may
that.
actually outdo their
Yeah.
infrastructure. But you know, Aditya, the fact is that while there's absolutely no question about the kind of quality of roads and our engineers and the kind of adverse conditions that they're building in, it's also a question of political resolve, isn't it?
Yes,
The fact that this government has actually kind of done a lot of things when it comes to China, building up on the border with China, the infrastructure wise. Was this a trigger after 2020, or was this realization already there, say 2014?
The realization was already there. I think the projects were already underway.
Yes.
What happened after 2019 and 20 was that there was a trigger to speed up the entire thing.
Right.
That we can't just have a lackadaisical approach.
Yeah.
I remember, the kind of roads that I traveled in. These are not
Yes.
normal roads. I almost felt, and I'm
They were
not
dirt
exaggerating,
tracks. Yes.
that I almost felt I'm traveling in Europe.
Right.
That entire road stretch,
Right.
and there were obviously no traffic out there, and the kind of roads and the kind of
Yes.
obviously pristine beauty that there
Right.
is. And the Nyoma airstrip that we talk about right now,
Yes.
that Nivriti brought us,
Yes.
this reminds me of the 2013 visuals from April,
Yes.
when the C-130 Hercules actually landed at DBO.
Right.
What a historic moment that
Yes,
was.
absolutely.
And now how far we have come from that time.
Yes.
The road connectivity that General Chaudhry spoke about,
Yeah.
we can actually go to DBO, to
Right.
Galwan Valley, to all these major points, and infrastructure wise and strategically,
Yes.
I think we have come a long way, and in the
Right.
next 5 to 10 years,
Right.
we would be certainly giving a challenge to China on
Would
the
be
on
giving
this
a
front.
challenge to China. And Air Marshal Chaudhry, this 2029, 2030 time frame, what do you see the Air Force kind of doing in terms of building up along the LAC to, strengthen our defenses there? One of the most heartening events of the last few years was the fact that when the clashes happened in 2020, as unfortunate as they were, the first thing the government did was to move up the Air Force.
Yes.
And we saw fighter jets landing there non-stop, this air bridge from Chandigarh to Ladakh being activated.
Yeah.
How do you see the Indian Air Force playing a role when it comes to strengthening our position on the ground along the LAC with China, which is a big flashpoint? And the government has mentioned that as of just yesterday, Foreign Minister Jaishankar said this.
It's very interesting that we wind back into history, and when it came
Yes.
to 1962, I think the biggest mistake we did was not bringing
Yes.
in offensive air power, and that's something we have regretted ever since. And but what is very interesting that you brought out, and it's a fact which has also happened in post-Dolam and in Galwan,
Yes,
is the speed at which the air power built up in the region
right.
was something did take the Chinese by surprise. And it worried them simply because PLAF, or the Chinese Air Force, has been weak in its footprint and presence in the Tibetan region. And that
Right.
is understandable because their primary threat is on the eastern seaboard against Taiwan. So all the
Right.
attention was there. But in the last, after Doklam and Galwan, I think they realized the importance, and they have absolutely gone full bore on their infrastructure development of airfields, bringing in more assets and resources. But what is important here, I want to bring in this factor here, is that the air aspect is vital, not only for maintenance, air
Right.
maintenance and logistics, which it has been historically since the 1950s. In fact, a lot of these forward bases were purely air maintained till the
Right.
roads came up. Today, we have come up with the roads, and it's taken a long time to get there.
Yes.
But do also remember that in this period, the Chinese have also built up the pace of infrastructure developing the region, and their rate of delivery and the scale of their projects are
Yes.
pretty staggering. So that is something we need to bear in mind. And what is important here is, which I would like to point out, is that in the northern region, especially from Leh, and Leh, Leh Ladakh sort of sandwiches JNK. On the other side, you have Pakistan as an adversary on the north, and the north
Yes.
eastern side, you have China. So that's an area which is, which has got threat from both sides.
Yes.
So geography it's a challenge there, and Pakistan has its airbase right across in Skardu, and it links up with Hotan, and the Chinese Air Force and the Pakistani Air Force have been taking part in joint exercises in a long time. There is a distinct effort by China to offset our air power advantage, which we've had till Galwan, and we will still
Yes.
probably enjoy it for a little more time,
Right.
till the full pace of development is completed in Tibet. So it's a very rapidly reducing margin while we have
Yes.
the infrastructure in place. Unless we, this country seriously looks at offensive air power
Yes.
as an important factor, not only as a deterrent against China, but an important responder of the first kind in this region and in any future conflict, we will be in trouble. Because offensive air power is what makes a difference. China is weak in its offensive air power capability in
Yes.
the region, which is why it chooses to sort of it depends on the rocket force in the region. That is why it has brought in the rocket force in the region in such a big way to compensate for the inadequacies of offensive air power, which the Indian Air Force has to its advantage even now.
Right.
So while these airfields are very critical, we must also understand that this place, this area, this whole region will in the near future will look forward and they will most certainly see a whole lot more air activity, and there will be issues of airspace violations, sovereignty, and all that, which is likely to come up. And I won't be surprised if tomorrow the Chinese Air Force is used in a manner similar to it is being done in the Taiwan Strait
Right.
to use it as a sort of a coercive signaling against India.
Right. Very range of threats that you've outlined there, Air Marshal Chaudhry, and the fact that offensive air power, that's an area that we, seriously lacking and we need to build up. So while the BRO's explosive road infrastructure build-up is welcome, it's the larger picture that we should be looking at, Aditya. Offensive air power, as Air Marshal Chaudhry mentioned. Nivriti, any closing comments from your trips there to Eastern Ladakh?
Not only the Border Roads Organization, because I have been in
Yes.
touch with them, and through them I have been covering these areas. Not only they are building some of the very state of art and infrastructure, and also in a very, very difficult terrain.
Yes.
If the infrastructure is to be built on the Tibetan side, it is easier for them.
They're on the plateau.
Yeah. But for us, it is very, very difficult to build in this difficult terrain. So
Yes.
they are building roads, they are building bridges, and the pace of laying roads has doubled. And recently I visited the Sela tunnel. So it is a state-of-art tunnel, longest tunnel on
Yes.
at that altitude. So these are the kind of infrastructure
That's being built in areas that we struggle to get our, even breathe, and that is the kind of challenge that the BRO is, accomplished its projects in the face of. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, Aditya and Nivriti, to talk about your personal experiences there. You've been to places where few Indians have been to, and you've covered stories for News9 Plus, and that's the kind of documentaries that they've done. You can watch it on our app. But thank you very much, General Chaudhry, Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury, for joining us and telling us that while 2029 is around the corner, 2030 could be the area, the time when we actually narrow our gap with China on the infrastructure, on our Himalayan infrastructure. There is no time to be complacent. We have to build up our air power as well. Offensive air power is the way we must go if we are to handle this two-front build-up, two adversaries in a collusive relationship in Eastern Ladakh. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, gentlemen.